I left the baby in the locker. When I picked up the phone, I was taken aback by the ridiculous statement made by David, which came through amid his boisterous laughter. At the same time, I tilted my head in confusion, not understanding what he meant. Right beside me, our daughter, whom David referred to as the baby, is sleeping soundly. If you're talking about our daughter, she's right here with me. Huh? Maybe he thought I was joking because he responded with, "Don't play tough with me. I'm not pretending anything. It's true." Then who's the baby in the locker? Then, I realized David had put a baby in a locker, and I went pale. My name is Heather Johnson. I'm 33 years old this year. Usually, I work as a preschool teacher, but I took maternity leave 6 months ago when our daughter, Emily, was born. Parenting has its challenges, but I was managing and enjoying it because my child is so adorable. My husband, David, is a businessman of the same age. We met through a mutual friend's introduction and got married 2 years ago. My friend once told me, "He's a great catch, but he just hasn't found the right person." And indeed, from the moment I met David, I thought he was quite the catch. Standing around 6 feet tall, and when I heard he worked really hard as a businessman, I was instantly attracted. He's also very considerate, and while we were dating, he always respected my opinions. I always wondered why someone like David hadn't married yet. When I asked David directly, he'd say something plausible like, "I just didn't find the right person." Deep down, I was glad David chose me. Even after our marriage, our life went on without any issues. At first, we spent quality time together, then found out I was expecting. Being a preschool teacher, I adore kids, so I was ecstatic when I learned I was pregnant. Eagerly, I shared the news with David. "Hey, honey! I'm pregnant." "Really? That's awesome." "I know, I'm so excited." "Thank you." David took my hand in joy, doubling my happiness. We both eagerly awaited the birth of our child. About 8 months later, Emily was born. I thought David would be over the moon, but he seemed a bit down for some reason. Maybe he was just overwhelmed with the reality of being a father. A kind of paternal postpartum depression, perhaps. "What's wrong? Aren't you happy?" "Well, I just remembered I'm not very good with kids. I'm just worried about it." "Don't worry. You'll get used to it. And hey, I'm a preschool teacher, remember? Leave it to me." "Well, if you say so." It seemed David was suddenly apprehensive about interacting with a child now that one was right in front of him. It's natural for anyone to feel uneasy about new experiences, so I wasn't too concerned at that moment. I didn't take David's words too seriously then. I had no clue that David would soon start exhibiting unpredictable behaviors. After the hospital stay, I returned home with Emily. Even though I'm a preschool teacher, I struggled a bit with first-time parenting. The late-night feedings were the hardest, and the sleep deprivation was mounting day by day. I tried my best not to wake David up every day as he had to go to work, but 1 month after giving birth, my body ached everywhere. Lack of sleep was taking its toll, and I found myself wearing thin. One Sunday, when David was off work, I asked him, "Could you please watch Emily for a bit? I just hoped to get a little break." I didn't mean for him to watch her all day. Just for an hour or 2 at most. But David frowned at my request, a look of disbelief on his face. "Why can't you handle that on your own? I told you I'm not good with childcare. But all you have to do is watch her for a bit. She mostly sleeps. When it's time, just give her the bottle." "You've got to be kidding. Think I can handle feeding her?" I was genuinely shocked at David's sudden change of attitude. Before Emily was born, he would have surely granted such a small request. In fact, I always thought he would say things like, "You okay? Why don't you take a break?" But in reality, it was the complete opposite. David didn't want to help with childcare at all. It felt to me like he was resenting Emily's presence. He would even make insensitive comments like, "Oh, if she wasn't here, we could have a free day just the 2 of us. Childcare is such a hassle." Sure, I understood that after having a child, we couldn't go out as often and couldn't have much alone time, leading to stress. But when I was pregnant with Emily, David seemed genuinely happy. That's why I felt at ease. I assumed he would be a great dad, willing to help out. But the reality was far from it. David showed no interest in childcare. In fact, from that day, he would often mutter, "If only she wasn't here." Every time I heard that, I felt sad and would respond, "Don't say such things." But David was not the kind man he once was. He would just scoff at my replies and stomp off to his room. I sighed and ended up handling childcare on my own, even during weekends. Half a year passed since David's unexpected refusal to help with childcare. I continued to raise Emily on my own. I'm a daycare worker, so I thought I'd be okay, but raising my own child was mentally taxing. It's not like it's easier with other people's kids, but with my own, I found myself worrying excessively. Lately, besides neglecting childcare, David started staying out often. I wondered if he disliked seeing Emily's face so much. Compared to when she was born, Emily had grown a lot and often babbled, sometimes even shouting out loud. Each time, David would seem irritated, saying, "She's so noisy." I was happy seeing Emily's growth, but to David everything seemed to bother him. When Emily first rolled over, he just remarked, "It's gonna be a hassle from now on, huh?" When it came to preparing baby food, I did it all, and the days felt longer than before. David just watched me struggle with a distant look. "I'm gonna be out overnight this weekend," he mentioned one day. "Oh, really? Maybe I'll visit your mom's place then." "Do whatever you want." While my parents lived out of state, David's mom lived just a 10-minute walk away. So, during tough times, I would seek help from my mother-in-law. She loved her first grandchild and was a huge help. "All right, I'll do that." David disliked caring for Emily on his days off, and he came home late on weekdays. On weekends, just went out without saying. I had gotten used to essentially being a single mother. The following weekend, after David left, I prepared to visit my mother-in-law, but I noticed Emily had caught a cold. She was coughing and had a runny nose. It wasn't severe enough for a hospital visit, but I felt bad taking her outside, so I called my mother-in-law. "I'm sorry. Emily caught a cold, so we won't be coming over today." "Oh dear, that's unfortunate. But it can't be helped. Please come over anytime you'd like." "Thank you very much." My mother-in-law was disappointed not to see Emily, but she was considerate of our situation. Grateful for such a supportive mother-in-law, I decided to spend the day quietly. Emily, who was sick, didn't seem too bad and was actually in a good mood. I felt relieved as I watched Emily sleeping peacefully. Since Emily's birth, there have been frequent misunderstandings with David, making it feel as if they were back in their single days. Lately, I have been staying home more, without even putting on makeup or doing my nails. Even though it's for Emily, I sometimes feel a bit lonely. Before I knew it, I had dozed off on the sofa and woke up 2 hours later. I noticed my phone on the coffee table vibrating. It was a call. Checking the caller ID, I saw it was from David. Wondering when was the last time David called me, I answered. Still feeling groggy. "Hey, is this Heather?" "Yeah." "What's up all of a sudden?" David sounded oddly cheerful. I waited for him to explain. "Heh, you're gonna be shocked when you hear this. Just spit it out already." Getting a bit annoyed with David's teasing, I was taken aback by his next words. "I stuffed the baby in a locker at the train station." "What? A locker? What's he talking about?" As I tilted my head in confusion. Right next to me, the baby David referred to, our daughter, was soundly sleeping. If David was making a joke, it was in very poor taste. Couldn't he come up with a better lie? "If you're talking about our daughter, she's right here with me." "Huh?" Either David thought I was joking or he said, "Don't play tough with me." "I'm not joking. She's really here with me." "Then, who's in the locker?" Only then did I realize that David had actually placed a baby in a locker. My face turned pale. "Hold on. You really put a baby in a locker?" "I told ya. I had some free time, so I went back to my parents' house. But you weren't there and there was a baby on the bed. It's hot out today, So I wonder how the baby's doing in the locker. David, still not believing that I was with Emily, had just said something unthinkable. I can't believe you. I've been home all day because Emily is sick. She's right here next to me. Do you want me to show you through a video call? It was only then that David seemed to realize that I was telling the truth. His laughter from earlier started to fade, indicating that he grasped the gravity of the situation. Wait, then whose baby is? Just take me to the locker now. While I had questions about why there was another baby at David's parents' house, saving the baby was the top priority right now. I took the sleeping Emily in a baby carrier and headed outside. After a short while, David drove up, so I got in the car. Seeing Emily, he was utterly shocked. I can't believe he mistakenly put his own child and another baby in a locker. I had various resentments, but it wasn't the time for arguments. When David got out of the car, he hurriedly returned to the locker. It's okay since I just put the baby in. I glared at David, who was nonchalantly trying to reassure himself, and quickly opened the locker. Oh my! Inside was a baby, exhausted from the heat. I immediately picked up the baby and fed it the milk I brought. The baby managed to start drinking once the bottle was given. See, the baby's alive after all. All that worrying for nothing. David's absurd comment made my blood boil. How could you say that? We were just one step away from this baby losing its life. But hey, everything turned out okay, didn't it? No use, David just wouldn't take things seriously. Realizing this, I immediately called an ambulance. At the hospital, the baby was examined and, though slightly dehydrated, was said to be in no critical condition. I was so relieved I felt my knees give out. When I contacted my mother-in-law, she was nearly in tears, relieved, saying, "Thank goodness." Turns out, she was babysitting the child of a friend she met in her cooking class. While she was in the restroom, the baby disappeared, and she had been searching frantically. I'm so sorry. This all happened because of David. It's not your fault, Heather. David is the one to blame. Who in their right mind puts a baby in a locker? My mother-in-law was furious, ready to give David a piece of her mind. But we managed to calm her down for the moment, and she contacted the baby's family. The baby's grandmother, who seemed understanding, said, "As long as the baby's safe." But I couldn't help but feel guilty. All the while, David was just spacing out, looking uninvolved. After a while, my mother-in-law and who must be the baby's grandmother arrived to pick up the baby. Following them was a woman who seemed like the baby's mother. Upon seeing this woman, David's eyes widened in shock. "Oh, Jessica. What are you doing here?" The woman David pointed to, calling Jessica, was the baby's mother who arrived late. "That's my line. Why are you here?" The mother shouted, looking like she was on the verge of a meltdown. My mother-in-law, the baby's grandmother, and I just stared in surprise at their exchange. "Let's move this somewhere private. My place." With the tension in the air, we all got into Jessica's car and headed to her place. No one spoke. David looked pale as a ghost. Only the occasional cries of Emily and Jessica's baby echoed in the car. So, care to explain what's going on? Once we arrived at Jessica's place, we were ushered into the living room. My mother-in-law and I, Amy and her mother, and David are sitting facing each other. David looked like he was about to be judged, while I felt like an innocent bystander caught in the crossfire. What exactly was the relationship between Jessica and David? More importantly, what's the relationship between you two? Driven by curiosity, I had to ask. Depending on their answer, our next steps would change. My mother-in-law certainly never expected that her friend's daughter and her son, David, knew each other. She was clearly flustered by this revelation. Only David seemed to fully grasp the situation, his face going pale. It seems something very wrong had taken place. "I've been seeing David," said Jessica. I was utterly speechless upon hearing this. Is she dating David? David is my husband. Does that mean he's been cheating on me? But for Jessica to so boldly announce this to me, his wife, seems strange. Wouldn't she try to hide it? Is that true? I'm David's wife. Are you two having an affair? David doesn't reply. I took his silence as an affirmation. However, Jessica shakes her head. While one suggests they are cheating, the other denies it. What's going on?
I was deceived. I had no idea David was married. I heard he was single and that's why I dated him. Why didn't you tell me?
Ah, now I understand. I shot David a fierce glare. Lying about being married and making moves on another woman? What a lowlife. According to Jessica, they met through a dating app about 6 months ago. Around the time Emily was born. Jessica's baby was just about 2 months postpartum then. It's surprising that she started using a dating app so soon, but she felt the desperate need for a father figure for her baby. The baby's biological father disappeared when he found out she was pregnant. While I can sympathize with Jessica's situation, that doesn't justify having an affair. However, since Jessica didn't know David was married, I can't blame her. All my frustration was directed at David.
You really did it this time, didn't you? Putting a baby in a locker is already a crime in itself. And now you've cheated too. What a despicable man.
I shouted, even in front of my mother-in-law. I could tell she was angry to learn what her son had done to his wife. She looked like she wanted to intervene, but Jessica and I were confronting David so aggressively that she didn't get a chance.
I didn't know either. I didn't know Jessica had a kid. If I'd known she had a child, I wouldn't have dated her. This is fraud. How are you gonna fix this? David retorted. What do you mean fraud? You're the real fraudster here. I had no idea you had a wife. Why didn't you tell me? And locking up my daughter in a locker? Are you out of your mind? I made a mistake. I intended to take Emily with me. How was I supposed to know she was your child? If you had told me about the child, this wouldn't have happened. I was planning to tell you eventually. Timing is everything with these things.
Things were spiraling out of control. Emily and Jessica's child started crying loudly because of the shouting, so my mother-in-law and Jessica's mother tried their best to console them. No matter whose baby it is, putting them in a locker is unacceptable. What you did is unforgivable. You do realize that it could have been life-threatening, right?
It was just a harmless prank. I told you, I was just trying to give you a little scare.
Finally losing my patience with David's excuses, I pulled out a lawyer's business card from my bag. I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore. Let's get a divorce.
What?
I had been considering the idea for a while now. David never really cared for Emily, and it even seemed like he resented her. I had grown tired of his attitude. So, I had already met a lawyer. With everything that had happened now, I had more than enough reason to leave him. David was left speechless. Well, figures. David never expected us to get a divorce. I bet his fling with Jessica was just for fun. Poor guy, this must have been a momentary lapse in judgment. But I can't deal with David anymore. I can't be with someone who tried to harm Emily.
Wait a minute. Divorce? Why all of a sudden? I'm not getting divorced.
Listen, it's not sudden. Ever since Emily was born, you've been awful to her and me. And now this. You think you can get away with it? You're gonna pay child support and divide the property, of course. Seeing the determined look on my face, David finally seemed to realize that the divorce was becoming a reality. Suddenly, he got up from his chair. With a pleading look, he glanced back and forth between Jessica and me.
Come on, just give me a minute. I can't afford it. Jessica, help me out. If I divorce Heather, you'll marry me, right? Didn't you say you wanted to be with me? I said I'd consider marrying you if you were single. And I can't trust a man who'd put a baby in a locker. I'll never marry you.
When Jessica firmly refused to marry him, David seemed to be deeply shocked and slumped down, muttering,
Oh,
too bad for you. This is what you get for neglecting your wife and child all these days. Do me a favor and get out. Emily doesn't need a father anymore. Brushing him off like an annoying bug with a shooing gesture, David reluctantly left Jessica's house. In his hand, He clutched the business card I'd given him earlier. I'm not sure if he'll contact them properly, but if he comes back, I've sworn to myself that I'll send him away. I'm sorry for dragging you all into this. And Jessica, cheating is unacceptable, but you're a victim too. You can find someone way better than a guy like that. I'm really sorry for what David did. I'm glad I realized early on what kind of person he was. We looked at each other and laughed. It felt like a weight had been lifted off our shoulders. After that, I left Jessica's place with my mother-in-law. Emily, amidst all the commotion, had once again fallen into a peaceful sleep. I want to live my life hoping only for his happiness. Even as a single mom, I'm going to raise Emily to be a wonderful adult. Then, my divorce from David was finalized. At first, David didn't want to see the lawyer, but after several confrontations and sending him away from our home multiple times, he must have finally given in. It seemed like my mother-in-law was strongly supportive. Through a lawyer, I successfully received the property. And child support, of course. I expect to be busy from now on, but I'm thinking of returning to my job as a daycare teacher. Somehow, Jessica and I became friends. It might sound weird to get along with my ex-husband's affair partner, but Jessica's child, Lily and Emily, were born around the same time, so they play well together. Also, Jessica and I just clicked, so now we visit each other's houses 2 or 3 times a month. Both of us were lonely raising our kids, so it feels good to have a friend who understands. We often give each other advice about daycare and baby food. I'm so over men for a while. Just Lily and me is plenty. Me too. And I've got a new friend in you. Exactly. Heather, let's keep this up. You bet. Things might get tough, but I'll take things at my own pace. With Emily by my side, I feel like I can overcome anything.